that time. And today, this week, we are talking about websites and AI, what the future of them holds for us, how, things that people are doing and potentially what people could be doing with them in the future. My name is Phelan with Seymour Digital Media, where we do search engine marketing.
And I'm Greg with Original 72 Creative, and we're a full service website graphic design and digital marketing firm in Vancouver.
Awesome. And so I think, jumping off, we've covered a lot of like the, AI, what it can and can't do, and I think we wanted to cover it from like web developer because there has been some improvements with it regarding the tool and how not necessarily it's gonna like fully take over your job. It's not like there's gonna be like we're all gonna be replaced by AI. I don't think anyone who thinks that I think is
Not
missing.
soon, at least, but
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm not.
some of it scares me a little bit. But
Yeah. There's like some more material reasons why I don't think it's gonna like take everyone's job, but considering like it takes thousands of people to make it sure that it runs without like apparently like saying slurs or saying offensive things. They have to like filter all that out.
yeah,
Um,
the topic for me came about because we had touched on a lot of AI stuff in the past, like
yeah,
here and there. But I thought it would be worthwhile for us to sort of do just how is it going to change our web development process from start to finish on like everything that's available and how we can use it and make us more efficient when we are building and stuff like that. So I thought it was a good topic that we could get into and give people insight into what they can expect and what they might be able to start using like right now in some of these tools.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that yeah, it's definitely one that it's stepped up a lot in its latest iteration, which is the paid tier. If you use ChatGPT, it's the paid version, and it's really stepped up its game. Um,
Hmm.
we've used it to even write some code, which we'll touch on in a little bit as well. So it's definitely made some bigger improvements than even I was anticipating of like what it's able to do. Obviously, it's still like modern. It still has
It's
constraints.
it's changing so fast,
Yeah,
and I know one of the services I use or themes that I use. Everyone knows this. I mention it often is Cadence,
yeah,
and they have Cadence theme, and they have a supporting block package called Cadence Blocks. And I know they have been working on AI features
hmm
within the theme, and because things are changing so fast, they've been, you know, waiting a long time because it's changing so fast. Like they're building something, they're trying to build something into Cadence to work, but because the AI features are changing so quickly, they're prolonging their development time because new things come up all the time, and like we shouldn't release yet. We should wait. There's this new thing. Let's build this in and stuff like that. So the pace of development for AI is massive right now.
yeah, yeah. I totally agree. And the other part that's interesting as well is the pace of development, not ChatGPT, but just the AI ecosystem, open source,
Hmm.
is moving even faster, and
Hmm.
it's totally being outpaced by them right now. It's just open source is even faster, so it's moving at a fairly rapid pace. So I could understand being like if you're any sort of company and you're trying to integrate these things that it's like the parameters of what you're trying to integrate move, then you're like it's even harder to kind of get an idea on what the product you're trying to deliver to your like a website theme, like doing something like that, like trying to figure out how to fully integrate it. Like I know that that's kind of a jumping off. A lot of them are doing like Shopify has this, and I think you mentioned a couple of the other WordPress ones where it's a lot of text generation. So it's basically kind of doing like nicer version of Laurel Ipsum is kind of the
Hmm.
way I think of it, where
Hmm.
it gives the client something to like All right, that kind of makes sense of like having this on this page. It's not just like random text, but it's actually like something specific to their business, and they can edit it, but like it's kind of a nice placeholder that they can kind of get their head around, like what is it going to look like on the homepage, for example.
Hmm. Yeah, and this is where I see the biggest benefit, at least for my work process, is that, in my 20 plus years of building websites, the holdback on literally every project is the client um, content and
Yeah,
images.
yeah,
So if there is a way now to be able to have relevant information to the business that I'm developing a site for, and we can pull that in using AI, it just gives the client that more feeling of inspiration of not going from I have no idea what to give you right now to oh that's pretty good but we need to change this, so it gives you that base, that idea base of what the client can go with, and then start the ball rolling to get content and as well images. It'll um, produce sort of themed, I guess, themed images to what your business is related to, kind of a thing, with some of the free stock photo sites. If you give it some type of context, it will pull images that it feels are similar, or might work for you, and even that will give the client an idea of what images can be used also. I'll just before we move any further, I want to tell a story about how I created a design for a client. We were doing a whole design build process. So I came up with the initial design concepts and went to present the concepts to them, and he hated it. Um, and was really negative and this is all wrong and stuff like that. So I was trying to get out of him, okay, what is it? Do you like this part? Do you like, is this good? Is this, and it turns out just the image that I used in place of where like the hero image would be was just the wrong image. And it gave him that like it's completely wrong
yeah,
feel. It had nothing to do with the layout, where the logo was, where the menu was, where the complete layout of the site that I had designed. It was all because I just used an image that he didn't like. And
yeah,
after I was like, "We'll use an image that you want to use," he was like, "Oh, perfect. Well, I love everything else."
yeah. It's always funny with like trying to pull apart and get clients. I think that that's the like you said is kind of the biggest part is like getting a better articulation from the client of like if you can get that 50% of the way there and then they just need to do like modifications off of that rather than having to start from like complete blank slate, and then if you could get most of the way there, then you can kind of get the client to like do the lifting to get the rest of the way there. But yeah, it's always a pain to do like blank slate with them and try to figure out from there like, oh, what do you want to do, and then trying to like tease all that out, or they don't like it like you said and you're trying to tease out like, well, I want it to be like flashier, and like, well, that's not really a concrete action. It's
Yeah.
uh
Well, let's jump into a couple of these AI tools that and how we can use them. The first one I wanted to mention was something that's just recently launched in the past couple of weeks, and it's called ZipWP.
mhm.
And what ZipWP is, you can you can go to them and have it create you a WordPress site after you've given it all of your information, like business name, and information about your business, stuff like that, and it will generate you a full WordPress site in like under a minute. Now, the drawback to that I see is one, it's great if you don't care about what it looks like, or and you're on a tight budget, and it's just like, I need a site like now, and you want to put minimal effort into what it ends up being. That I see this as a good option for people who just need something really quick and don't really want to do much to it. And I don't, suggest that, but it will give you a full functioning WordPress site, with relevant information to your, business, industry, images, relating to that as well, within a minute, that you can, use, revise, or whatever. But it gives you what it gives you. You don't really have,
Yeah.
um, control over the look, or anything like that. It just spins up a site, and whatever it spins up for you is, what you got. And from that
Yeah.
point forward, you can start revising it and things like that, if you like, if you want it to be a starting off point for something.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's definitely one of those, like any of the tools like that kind of also makes me a little nervous on like how would they go and implement it that I could go and edit it afterwards, or they there's a lot of like really practical questions on like if I'm going to go and physically do it, like what would the experience be like after one of these things has generated a full website. At least if it's technically part of like a system like Cadence, you would expect that they'd be using their own theme, so it would be
Hmm.
within those parameters, so it would be relatively easy for you to jump in afterwards. But if it's just like, we're going to generate you a whole website, I'm like, well, do I have to edit the code, or like how's that going to work?
From what I understand about ZipWP is, I believe it uses the Spectra One maybe theme, which is a block based theme.
Mm-hmm.
Don't quote me on that, but
No, I can I
uh, but
can I
but
can
I
assure
believe it
that.
uses a very it's a quite common, themes like Cadence. It's not
Okay,
using Cadence, but it's using,
a variant.
I think
Yeah.
maybe Spectra and Spectra blocks, as its base of what it's giving you.
Okay, so yeah, yeah, and I've used Spectra blocks and it's very similar to Cadence, like some minor differences, but yeah, it's very similar um, type of system.
Yeah.
So if it's using something like that, that might be interesting to try. It's interesting to see what the future is going to hold, because I know that when we were talking about this in prepping notes, that we were talking about like landing pages would be one that would be interesting, of like one where it's very samey, all the landing pages, like even like because there's certain things that you're going to expect, of like a big headline that tells you like what to expect. There's some things about the process. You're going to have some sort of um, like uh, signifiers of like authority, right? Like some
Hmm.
sort of like, we've worked with blah blah blah, and like a whole bunch of those, and then you've got a form. So it's like if you just sort of input those bits of information into like a Google form, and then it goes off and like makes you a landing page. So it doesn't seem out of the question for something that you could quickly generate. Or even companies like, I know Lead Pages is integrated AI, but it's mostly for content writing. That's kind of the
Hmm.
big one that it's done a lot of. But I could see it in the future of, hey, give us these bits of information, we'll generate you a Lead Pages landing page using that bit of information, because they would also have first party data on like what is effective, what is working well. And so I could see these things starting to coalesce where it just sort of speeds up the time that you would be spending assembling this page. It's going to wind up being the same as everyone else's that could have just been generated by putting in bits of information, right?
Hmm. I've seen also a couple of examples where, sometimes it gives you a choice,
Hmm.
like a preview of like three different sort of layouts that you might be able to pick. Like, I prefer, this style or this layout, and it'll generate it like that, as opposed to just generating what it wants for you without some choice. So I
Yeah.
believe that will probably be something that, becomes more and more common. when, at least in the web AI generation stuff, is trying to give you a little bit more of that layout option and style. So you'll pick a feel to it, and it'll create it in that feel.
Okay. Yeah, I could definitely see that as being, and I think we'd also talked about that as well, of like using the AI to more filter out choices and give you like, do you like A or do you like B? Okay, I like B. Okay, maybe change this in B, like that sort of stuff where it's not so much that it's deciding, but it's helping you eliminate a lot of choices that you would have to make and getting it down to like the core kind of um, it's not making all the decisions, but it's definitely helping you come to a decision.
So I don't know if ZipWP specifically is affiliated with Spectra and Spectra blocks at all, or if they're really separate and just using that theme and block package because that's what they think they prefer, or not. I know the person who has created ZipWP is very much a pro Spectra and Spectra blocks person, builds all of their sites with it. But I see Cadence similarly with their AI that they're bringing out, um, basically doing the same thing as ZipWP, but not as a separate like not as a separate service where you would go to ZipWP and do this. Whereas with it would get you a Spectra and Spectra blocks theme. Cadence is implementing their eyes in a way where if you use the Cadence theme and the Cadence block package, when you install it, it comes up with a process of like, do you want to, install a template, or do you want to, use AI to generate you a site right now on Cadence and Cadence blocks? And so their AI implementation basically is more within their theme. So you install their theme, and then you get the option of like, okay, I see your I just got a clippy sort of feel to me. I see you're trying to build a website. Would you like help?
Oh, Clippy.
Not that it's
Yeah.
going to be like Clippy, but that kind of a thing when you install the theme and you get started, there'll be an option of like, do you want AI's help and give us this information and have a bunch of stuff created for you, or do you want to just like do your own thing, kind of a process. So that's how they're doing their implementation, and it'll have very similar things to ZipWP, where it'll generate your site based on the context that you give it of your business name, and details of your industry, and the types of things it wants you to generate pages for, and as well the images from the stock photo sites that they're involved with. You'll be able to pick a style of images that you feel will work for you, and it'll also pull in and suggest those images. So slightly different at the beginning, but basically you're accomplishing the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense as well. Of like, I definitely see that as being the future of just kind of like, there's a classic book of like automate the boring things. I see it as that's kind of the best use case for it, of just like things that are kind of repetitive, that you could just get something like this to just go and rather you having to set up the whole website, of like if they just gave you like we said earlier, the 50%, right, where it's got like most of the page is done, most of the layout's done, and then you're just sort of picking it with the client of like, oh, actually here I wanted to like embed a video or something like that, where it's like there may be some specific things that the client wants to have featured on the website, and then it's our job to just make the customizations to it rather than like doing the whole setup, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then how we're going to tailor it to them. Um, and I think that that will make sense for how to do it that way. I think the other part that like we kind of touched on as well, that I think would be I'm excited to see when it gets to leave come to Canada is like Google Bard. I think it's also going to be super helpful for not necessarily the website, but like your workflow with your client of like making sure all the files are where they're supposed to be, making sure like everything's nice, and so your workflow of actually going and working with the client is seamless. Supposedly, the Google Bard is going to be integrated with Google Workspace, so it'll be able to
Hmm.
scan your drive. Uh, and so for me, I know that it's helpful for if you've got a fair number of clients, especially new ones, and you like onboard them, and then here I want the folder structure to be like this, and then give them access to this folder so I can easily get their images, their videos, any text they have. They can easily have it sourced and placed, and so that way it's easy for our team to go and work and build websites. So I see that as potentially being a really useful tool for not necessarily the website like development itself, but the workflow becoming a bit more streamlined and making sure that nothing gets missed in the process.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So other than the two that I've mentioned so far, I know you, I think probably more than I do, use Wix and Shopify, and you had mentioned they have options for AI. Can you tell us a little bit about what we see for AI in those services?
Yeah, so the Shopify one, that one's fairly like all the other ones that I kind of mentioned. It's more text generation. That's kind of like been their big. So instead of coming with the product description all by yourself, they just ask for a couple of prompts like what is the product, what tone of voice, any special features, and then it will generate a bunch of text for you.
Hmm.
So fairly straightforward based on everything we've been talking about so far. The Wix one is they're supposed to be they're rolling out something like called ADI, so artificial design intelligence. So I think it's
Hmm.
kind of closer to what we've been talking about of like giving you the layout and everything, and it's all
Spinning
built
you
with
up a quick site somehow based on prompts
you're
you're
giving it.
filling in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my understanding right now. I haven't had a chance to really dive in with Wix. Most of our clients that are on Wix, we're not really making big changes to their website right at the moment. So it's not one that I've had an opportunity. And as well, Wix is not necessarily my favorite platform. It's okay, but it's not one I'm gonna seek out and spend time in the platform going like, ooh, how does this new tool work? Um, yeah, so it's not the best. Uh, yeah, we also talked about Divi because they're a very popular one. So supposedly, they're going to be doing the AI, which I actually think is good for them because Divi, if used incorrectly, can just add so much extra HTML that if it had an AI tool to minimize the amount of HTML that you need to like set up blocks in a specific pattern, that I think that that would
Hmm.
actually be good for their system overall because it's a little too overzealous with like adding a bunch of divs and rows and columns to like get it all lined up properly.
Divi was always that theme that I never ever used, but always saw uh, people. It was really to me the first complete do-it-yourself site, and with flexibility of creating um, very drastically different layouts from a standard WordPress site. And I
Yeah,
think that's why they got so big so quick and so popular. But they did it in such a way that I believe completely threw out the window HTML structure behind the scenes and how a website is built. Like it was a mess
yeah, yeah. I
behind
mean,
the scenes.
they were doing the best they could with like the available tools to build a drag and drop builder, but the problem is like you boxed yourself in so much without like completely revamping how the tool works, and then also making it like you know uh, pass proof, right? Like breaking existing Divi websites. Like it's easy to just like fully rebuild the thing with like new modern tools, but most likely they were going to break every previous Divi theme, and
Yeah.
people are going to be upset about that. So it's kind of like one of those, like, you almost become a victim of your own success, of like you're super popular, but like in your popularity makes it difficult for you to then like completely revamp and redo how your system works.
Hmm.
Uh,
A couple of notes before we move on from web stuff, because I know we're going to chat quickly about maybe some SEO and ad things to wrap up here. But I see AI potentially becoming much better for like the chat assistants, which I've historically hated the automated responses, and it would just let me talk to a human,
yeah,
right? But this is my first go to, but I see a case where the level of AI intelligence is going to drastically change the um, that process and could become quite good now. The second one is improving personalization
yeah.
on your site. Depending on what your site is or what it's doing, you could I see in the future like really really good improvements on personalization with the customer. So we'll look for that in the future.
Yeah, I definitely I second especially the chatbot one, because I could see a future of one of the large firms, you use your first party data from like Zendesk or like whatever your support tickets that are existing, so that it learns
Hmm.
from those tickets, oh, this was the solution and this was the most recent solution to it. So scanning like all that data and then being able to synthesize it for a customer that's coming, like, oh, we've noticed that this issue has been happening with two other people. This was the solution. Boom, here you go. And like doing it that way, I think that's definitely a good possibility. Where I think that, yeah, historically, like you said, they're really awful, and honestly, I feel like they've gotten worse. Even
Hmm.
like some of the newer ones, like Facebook, like the less I tell the Facebook chat support, the better my results are for dealing with someone, which is probably not a good sign for them. I mean, I get what probably why, but it's like why they do it that way. But yeah. While we are closing up, I don't know if we'll have time for the SEO port, but I definitely wanted to touch on one thing that we've really been using, especially the paid version of ChatGPT, is code generation.
Hmm.
And so for our case, it's like it's in the context of like Google Ads, because what we could do is give it like a write me a script, a Google Ad script that does like when this happens, send me an email letting me know, when a keyword is like hasn't converted in a week, for example. I want to email with all those keywords, so then I can know, okay, let's go see what's going on. And it's just letting us know before we even have to go log in. So it's just kind of a tool, and because we give it such like specific parameters of like a kind of an if then statement, you can also put the code in and say, hey, when I put that code in, I got this error message. Please fix your code. It will also update that and then scan and fix its own code. Um,
Hmm.
so it's been pretty useful for that, and that's generally kind of why I see like the website stuff really taking off. Of like, if we give it the colors, right? Like it knows that there's going to be a button, and then it's just going to swap out whatever the color that you gave it. It's like, here's my color scheme, and then it's going to be able to combine those things into a page and be able to generate that code of like a page design. Uh,
Yeah, I really feel now after talking about this to try and use ChatGPT to generate me some code specific stuff, like real world cases with the theme that I use, which is Cadence, and see if it can give me what I'm asking of it. I'll have to come up with some test cases of like things that I want to do to a site and see if I can go to ChatGPT and prompt it and it give me a piece of code that I can just plug in to the theme I'm using and see how if it works right off the bat, or if I would have to make modifications to like CSS selectors or things like that if I'm trying to generate some CSS to do something. specific to a certain block, for instance.
Yeah, it's definitely one that I recommend people experiment with. Of like, I was a little, I'm pretty skeptical overall of AI tools. But like, it's definitely been, you know, looking at it as a way to just kind of save your time um, by using these tools to like basically just shorten the distance of the boring stuff and be able to just deliver on the important parts that like no AI is going to be able to replace you for, like figuring out decisions of like design elements and stuff like that. Like they'll be able to give you like a basic version, but like the client's probably going to want to have specific things of like, oh, I wanted to like make sure that we emphasize this part of it. Or my customers always mention this. Oh, we should include that as like a section here. Stuff like that that it's not going to know to do. And so I think that focusing on that part of it, I think is the definitely the future of it. And then also like just even the basic code generation, it's like gets you 80-90% of the way there with something like a Google ad script. It's not going to be perfect, but like I mean, I could write those ad scripts, but like it's tedious, right? It's like figuring out like, oh, I didn't write this function correctly. It's not like it's super complicated. It's just it's tedious to like learn the correct syntax.
And if people don't know coding or can at least read coding and understand what it's doing, it's probably not the easiest thing to do on your own. Whereas people like right now, I think people like us who do um, a little bit of code can generate it easier there, modify it, then implement it, as opposed to someone who has absolutely no idea about code and is just like wanting something on their website and going to Chat GPT and saying, this is what I want to do, generate me something, and they don't know what ChatGPT is really giving them and whether it would work or wouldn't work, and then trying to figure out, okay, now how do I actually put this into my site, kind
Yeah,
of a thing. So it's not yet the code generation for your stuff, website is not yet ready for the people who don't know what they're doing.
yeah, it still can definitely be a bit dangerous if you're not super familiar with what it's doing, like you said. And in front like front end cases of like website design stuff, I'd have to see. It's definitely it could definitely help people, but it just as easily could, like you said, break something. So just be careful with that. The reason why I mentioned the Google Ads is because we give it a very specific parameters of like a when this happens in the account, send us an email with this bit of information. So it's kind of more
Mm-hmm.
of a notification, but you can also do it where it's like it checks a spreadsheet that it fills in with search terms. We change like a status, and then it will add it to a negative keyword list or not. So you can do stuff like that as well, but like we're giving it very specific parameters. Whereas I feel like yeah, just generally coding something on a website, you don't know how it's going to interact with other code, all that good stuff. Um, Anyway, we have come up to time.
I
So,
could talk about this for a lot longer.
yeah, we didn't, yeah, we're still didn't cover everything in our chat or
So I
notes.
do know what we've got coming up next week, and it's going to be with yourself and Pip. You guys are talking about SEO and done for you tools you should
Oh,
use. Yeah, done for
done
that's
for
a
you
weird title.
tools. Should you use them?
SEO and done for you tools. Should you use them?
Yeah. So it's kind of covering some of those tools that like, 2 clicks and will SEO your website. Or are they,
Ah, hmm.
some of those ones that are kind of like how people are interpreting the AI of like, yeah, we just click a button, boop boop, and then it's all done. Don't have to think about it.
That was a
Uh,
tongue twister for me.
fair, fair. Um, all right, so that leaves it for me to say my name is Phelan.
And I'm Greg. Thanks for joining us today.
Yep. Bye for now.